Hello, 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 hello. Afternoon, everyone, or whatever time of day you're watching this. Good morning, good night, good evening. How are you doing today? I'm the Jack Pilot. Today we're going to be going over Task B, or Part 2 to this series that we're doing for the FOI CFI ACS 2024 version. So we're going to be going over the Task B learning process today. It's a little bit of a long one, so buckle up. I'll try to condense it down as much as I can, so the video isn't over 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or an hour. But I will try to get through it for you. So, um, if you're coming to this video already, you're trying to get your CFI license or at least brush up on your material. So I have already one video out, Task A. So if you would like to go over that video, go over that one. But this is part of a series I'll be making, and there'll be more after this video as well. So if it's in the future or whatever, then click on those videos as well. So yeah, let's get started. So first, we have actually the definition of learning. Now I have this file over here onto the right. It's actually for the PTS, but it still applies just because some things didn't really change for the PTS and the ACS regarding Task B. Now we have definition of learning. So the definition of learning right here: the acquisition of knowledge or understanding of a subject or skill through education, experience, practice, or study that results in a change in behavior. Now we can break this down to a simple sentence: a change in behavior as a result from an experience. That's verbatim the definition that we can use. So if your DP asks, say, hey, tell me the definition of learning. A change in behavior as a result from an experience. That is the sentence you use. Now I would say, okay, well, what do we mean a change in behavior from a result from experience? Well, if I ask a student, brand new, and say, all right, give me a stall. Well, they're not going to know what they're going to do, even if I've brought them, to a stall or whatever, and they know how to do it, or they know the what's involved with it. They may be a little bit hesitant of, bringing the power back really, really slowly, pulling the flaps out really. They're kind of nervous almost. But then, when they're getting ready for their check ride and they're 40, 50, 60 hours in, they're ready for their check ride, and I tell them to give me a stall, and they instantly know how to do it. They bring that power back, bring those flaps up. That is going to be a change in behavior, where they instantly want to go back to their training and they know what they have to do. That's going to be, for example, change in behavior as a result from an experience. They've done all the experience that they have doing the stall. So moving on to learning theory. We have learning theory as applies to ground and flight instruction. Now, we have two sections, behaviorism and cognitive theory. But this is actually broken down a little bit more, and I'll break it down a little bit for you. So we use the acronym BKIC HOTS. Now, SBT, scenario-based training, it does apply to this, but it's actually brought down a little bit later, so we'll go over that later. So BKIC HOTS SBT, or BKIC HOTS, or BKIC, whatever you want to use for this learning theory. First, we have behaviorism. All right, behaviorism, it's on the ACS right here. Human behavior can be predicted based on rewards and punishments. So as a CFI, if I say, oh yeah, when we get done with this, if you do really well on, these stalls or your cross country or whatever, then we can, kind of just burn some time and whatever, then they're going to be kind of motivated to do well and, based on a reward. Anyway, so that is going to be the definition of behaviorism. So then we have, cognitive theory, right? So it's in the ACS right here. Cognitive theory focuses on the thinking process. Now, when you think of cognitive, I think of the brain, right? It's the brain, how the brain functions and everything like that, right? So cognitive theory, it's just the brain focuses on the thinking process. Simple enough, right? The ability to kind of take in information and divulge into it in your brain. Then we have, so that checks off the box right here, right? But we can go into it a little bit further, right? We have the information processing theory, constructivism, and high order thinking skills. Now, technically, it's kind of read between the lines right here on learning theory, since this does still apply, but I'll kind of talk about it still as well. So we have information processing theory, computer system model for human learning, brain processes incoming info, stores it, retrieves it, and generates responses. So it's kind of a complex definition, but we can break it down, right? It's the way your brain processes the information, stores it, retrieves it, and you can generate responses. That's it. No computer system, blah 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 blah. No, just break it down. That's what we're here for. Easy, right? Your brain processes the info, stores it in your brain into long-term memory or short-term memory, right? Retrieves that information and then just gives responses, right? Just normal thinking, normal learning, normal generating responses. Easy. No, we already got that down. Cool. Constructivism, all right? Knowledge and skills are based upon or built upon experiences, right? Constructivism, right? Constructing, right? One by one by one. Everything is built upon experiences. You built one by one by one. If you're in the pattern, right, you're going to end up correcting for some other things, right? You're going to know things off the top of your head because you're built upon more experience, more experience. There's those building blocks, essentially, is that constructivism regarding the learning theory. Then we have high order thinking skills. This is more or less a scenario-based training because it's incorporated into those higher order thinking skills. But it's training based on problems and scenarios, right? Which is essentially ADM in your scenario-based training. Student must select the best solution and explore other ways to accomplish the task. So if I'm giving my student a problem to solve, if I say, all right, you're at 5,500 feet and MSL, and you have an engine out, what are you going to do? Well, the student's going to process that. They're going to explore the best solution, best outcome. They're going to go through the ABCs, right? Airspeed 76 or whatever your best glide is in your aircraft. In my instance, it's 76. So airspeed 76, best place to land, and then C, checklist. Run through the checklist in my head, right? That's what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to pick my best place to land, aim for it, and I'm going to land with it in a field that's within my performance limitations, right? So it's the way the student can kind of think of that regarding the higher order thinking skills and give them ways to accomplish that task. Now next, we have perceptions and insights. So there's two sections to perceptions and insights, right? So when your DPE is coming up and say, okay, well, tell me what are perceptions, right? All learning comes from perceptions initially, right? But all learning comes from perceptions. That's what this is. All right? Then insights. Insights are the grouping of perceptions into meaningful wholes. So, what this means, if I'm in a stall, or a correction, if I'm getting ready to go into a stall, right? I bring my power back, I bring my flap zip, I'm at my VSO speed or my VS1, and I'm bringing that power back little by little. Well, I have rectangular wing shape for a training aircraft, right? So that buffet is going to be felt along, right? So I have the perception, that I have the perception that I'm hearing the plane engine RPM go down. I'm seeing the engine RPM go down. I'm feeling the buffet. I develop the insight that I'm going to stall. I see the airspeed dropping. I hear the stall horn indicator, right? These are all perceptions. They are more or less incorporated into the five senses, you could say. And then it goes into the insight. Well, I'm developing all of that insight that I'm going to stall the aircraft. So the grouping of perceptions into meaningful wholes, that is what a meaningful whole is. So that's that. And then we have actually factors that affect perceptions. We use the acronym GSTEP, right? So we have goals and values, self-concept, time and opportunity, and element of threat, physical organism. So these all affect your perceptions, right? But essentially it's almost the five senses, but a little bit more than the five senses. So we have goals and values. People interpret things differently, right? So people may, see something, but they interpret it in a different way than someone else would, right? Just like in the previous video, like you have people that have different personalities. You have people that, associate different things with what they're seeing or hearing or feeling. So it's going to be different. Then we have self-concept. We have confidence and insecurity. It's always important to have a good self-concept and to be confident about your insight and about your perception, whether it's right. It's always good to, as a CFI, to test your students' self-concept as well. Making sure they're confident, especially if they're pre-solo, right? We have time and opportunity. Students should be given enough time to fly and learn something, right? You don't want to throw someone, a new private guy just right into the sea. Okay, 5 hours or 10 hours or okay, you're ready to solo. No, but you want to make sure they're a safe pilot. Make sure you've given them the instruction, the proper regulations regarding the airspace and proper taxi diagram procedure, taxi procedure, appropriate ATC dialect, things like that. Give them time to adapt. Give them time to adapt to those perceptions. Let them perceive what they need to so that they can develop the insight. Otherwise, if you keep, if you keep doing your stall yourself, they're not going to learn. They're not going to hear properly. Just give them time because they're a new pilot. They need to kind of sense everything going on in the plane. We have an element of threat, which narrows the perceptual field. Attention is limited to the threat. Now, we have the element of threat. So, if I'm in the plane with my student, all of a sudden on my information page or my notices page, whatever it is, I say, alternator failure, or something flashing red or yellow or caution, whatever it is. Well, the student's going to hear that or see that. They're going to be like, oh wow, what is that? Like something's flashing red, right? And you're still going to be, you pop the circuit breaker in and you put it back in and it's fixed. Well, the student is still going to be, limited on that element of threat. They're going to be like, oh, what is that? Like, is that good or bad, whatever it is. They're going to be more focused on that. So it's good at the end of the day maybe to just go back and call it until get another plane or whatever, make sure maintenance checks it out. But you want to make sure the student feels safe as well in the aircraft. Then we have physical organism, the 5 senses. Now this is exactly what I was talking about earlier. The factors that affect perceptions are going to be the 5 senses, just like what I've been talking about. Simple enough. Then we have acquiring knowledge on the ACS. Well, we have it right here. We use the acronym MUA, acquiring knowledge, memorization, understanding, application. But this is also known as RUAC, which is the levels of learning. You could call it acquiring knowledge, but it's also the levels of learning. Which is rote, understanding, application, correlation. If you want to look up that, just look up the levels of learning, rote, understanding, application, correlation. That'll pop up. So rote memorization is just that, it's right here, listed right here. Just the initial, thinking, like the you haven't really learned anything, but you know the answer, right? You know the answer and what it exactly looks like, what the exact answer looks like. They do just off the top of the head, right? If my best glide airspeed, right, 76. My VX, it's 64. My VY, right, that's 76. Right, that's going to be the memorization and rote understanding. So, a rote memorization. We have understanding, where the students begin to organize facts and steps into groups that come together to form an understanding of how something works. Basically, understanding is just, in a sense, putting 2 and 2 together, right? That's it. It's putting 2 and 2 together. Simple enough. Then the application, the students apply the memorized and understood information to accomplish a task, right? The memorization is the rote, right? They know let's say the traffic pattern, right? They know the upwind, crosswind, downwind, base, final, right? They know that. They understand the airspeeds that they have to be at to the effects of coming in on a stabilized approach, right? They understand that. Then the application, where they actually apply it to the pattern. They go up and do the pattern. They make their upwind, crosswind, downwind, base, final calls, right? They are pulling back the power to 1700 RPM, a beam, the threshold, and they're bringing the 1 notch of flaps. They can actually apply it to real life. It's going to be that. And actually, it isn't listed in here, but the correlation on the levels of learning is going to be how and why it's important for future, right? How and why developing the application is necessary for the future, right? Developing a stabilized approach. Well, developing stabilized approaches in other airfields, maybe different airfields that maybe have a left pattern or a right pattern, whatever it is, because that could be something that affects that, right? The effects of altitude, right? That's going to be correlation, more or less, right? So then we have the laws of learning. We're all familiar with the laws of learning, the REAPER acronym. So the readiness, effect, exercise, primacy, intensity, recency. So the readiness, right, the basic needs must be satisfied. The student must be ready in and of itself. Effect, the pleasant or satisfying feelings that strengthen learning. Effect, you want to have a pleasant effect on the student. Or you want to have, I should say what the student's learning must be effective and have a good feeling for it, essentially. In exercise, connections are strengthened with practice. Of course, practice makes perfect. It makes it easy. And then primacy. And if your DPE asks you, which they will, they'll say, what is the most important law of learning? And you're like, oh, Reaper. I'm going to go through it. Readiness, effect, exercise, primacy, intensity, recency. Oh, primacy. Why? Because it's the first thing taught and has a strong, hard-to-shake impression. It is the key word, The first thing taught, all right? The first thing taught, because this is where habits are formed. This is where habits are formed. This is where habits are formed. That is what you're going to say for primacy, and which is the most important law of learning in all of aviation and just learning in general. Primacy is very important. Now we have intensity. Intensity, exactly as it sounds. Exciting, dramatic, real situations teach a student more than just a boring experience. So the intensity of it, you know, pulling we're all familiar with the CFI pulling your engine, retarding the throttle back. That's going to be that intensity. And if you tell them, say, okay, don't touch throttle, like, what are you going to do? That would be a little bit more of an intense situation rather than going up and planning. Here's what you're going to do. That's giving that them feeling, or giving them the feeling rather. Then the recency. Things most recently learned are best remembered. Simple. That's it. Recency, just like readiness, exercise. They're easy. Cool. So the laws of learning, Reaper. Make sure you know that. I guarantee you'll be asked that on your check ride. Then we have the domains of learning, right? We have the cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. So, here's 3 words, right? Cognitive, affective, psychomotor. Thinking, feeling, doing. Remember earlier we were talking about cognitive, the way the brain processes information and thinks. This cognitive is going to be your thinking process, right? Specific facts. The cognitive essentially is just the memorization and understanding. Then we have affective, the feeling, the way it affects you, right? The way it affects the student's emotions, the way it affects the learning experience, right? It's going to be feeling. We have psychomotor, the doing, right? So thinking, feeling, doing. Psychomotor, just imagine a motor, right? Motor's doing something. It's doing something, right? Skill-based and requires repetitive practice in practical test prep. Psychomotor is going to be that doing thing, right? It's going to be doing, putting the throttle in, or starting an aircraft, or whatever it is. If I'm doing 8s on pylons, then I'm going to be doing that, right? Simple. So thinking, feeling, doing. Cognitive, affective, psychomotor. Cool. Or you just learn CAP for domains of learning. Then we have the characteristics of learning. PIMA is what we use, right? These purposeful, right? 1. Result of experience, multifaceted, and active process. So it's purposeful. Everything has to be important, right? You have to see it from a different viewpoint on why this is important. Right? It's kind of like that correlation aspect, right? It's seeing why this is purposeful for the future, seeing what we can do look at it as a different viewpoint. So rather than looking at it at our airfield at 1,000 AGL, maybe we're at Aspen, right, where the elevation is like somewhere around 9,000 feet, right? It's going to be a different scenario. We're looking at it from a different viewpoint, right? That learning situation. Cool. Result of experience. Knowledge cannot exist without personal experiences, and everyone has different experiences. Simple. Result of experience. If I'm learning and I don't know what an engine does, right? I'm gonna have a little bit of a hard time. But if I'm got some time under my belt, maybe as a mechanic, and all of a sudden I want to get my pilot's license, well, that's gonna come easy for me, right? Because I had that experience, right? Knowledge cannot exist without personal experiences. Simple. We have multifaceted. While learning one thing, students may learn other things while doing things. Students may be learning other things also. It's incidental. So here's one I like to use. If we're in the traffic pattern, right, and my student, I say, okay, maintain whatever it is, half a mile from the airport. Make sure it's on the, let's say, about the wing length, right? So if I'm seeing the wing right here, the runway should be on it, right? Simple, like that. Then they're going to maybe automatically correct for the wind correction without even realizing it, right? They want to keep it on there. Oh, but look, I'm a proud CFI because my student is learning how to incidentally correct for wind correction, which I love, right? This is going to be multifaceted. And we have active process. Students should always be learning. Students are always going to be learning. It's an active process. When you're in the plane, the students are always going to be learning and taking in information. Simple. So that is going to be PIMA, characteristics of learning. Then we have scenario-based training, SBT. And this is what I was talking about earlier with the BKIC HOTS SBT. The high order thinking skills is basically involved with the scenario-based training. Again, scenario-based training, kind of how well a student can divulge in their ADM, or kind of the steps of their ADM along as they're becoming a private pilot and eventually instrument, commercial, whatever it is, a CFI. Giving them a situation, a situation, or issue to solve, or a problem, and how they're going to mitigate risk and how they're going to correct for it and what the appropriate action they're going to take, and go one step over another, then eventually get to the solution of, okay, what could I have done better, right? That's going to be the key thing about scenario-based training. What could I have done better? What other solution could have been better, right? That's going to be reflection and looking back at it. Then we have acquiring skill knowledge, right? Acquiring skill knowledge is right here. We use the CA or the CAA. I just use the CA for acquiring skill knowledge, right? Cognitive, associative, and automatic response. So acquiring skill knowledge, the stages, right? Knowledge of results and how to develop skills, and learning plateaus. So we have the stages, right? We have the cognitive, where it's just the brain takes in the information, memorizes, right? Another stage, the next stage, which is the associative, where you're able to associate your senses and the feeling with actually what's going on. Then you have the automatic response, and this is the last one of the stages, where it comes with practice. You've done it so many times, and you're able to do it without even thinking. If I say, "Oh, put me into a stall," all right, I'll put you into a stall. Boom, doom, I'm doing this, do this. Boom, stall. Okay, it's automatic. I know how to do it off the rip, easy. So that's going to be CAA or the CAA, acquiring skill knowledge. Then we have the knowledge of results. So this is the one thing with the ACS, it can be very bland sometimes when they're describing this, or how to develop skills, right? Skills are going to be developed over time. How to develop skills? Essentially just by building hours. I mean, you need experience, right? So you need your result of experience. Again, this is going back to the characteristics of learning, PIMA, being multifaceted, result of experience, purposeful, active process. That's going to be how you develop your skills. Then we have the learning plateaus. All right, learning plateaus. A plateau. Your student's doing real well. They've soloed. They've done all this. They've done their cross country, and maybe they're not getting their let's say steep turns down. Right, they're plateaued. They've kind of reached their limit, and maybe it's okay to take a week off, 2 weeks off, 3 weeks off. It's okay to take that time off and just let everything regenerate, just relax a little bit, come back into the flight training, possibly a month later or whatever it is, a couple days, and take a break. You're going to come back, and it's going to feel amazing, right? That's just because when you've done it, you've done burnout. You burn out. People burn out, right? It's okay. It's okay to burn out. Just give it some time and just relax. Because we don't want to be over strenuous doing our training and, risk we want to mitigate risk as much as possible, right? And if you're up there, you're tired and you've burnt out and you're at a plateau, it's okay to give it things some time. All right. So that's going to be that. Then we have types of practice, right? We have types of practice. So we have deliberate, random, and blocked. So DRB, deliberate, random, blocked. Types of practice. Deliberate. We're going to go up. We have a set plan. We're going to do stalls. We're going to do lazy eights. We're going to do eights on pylons. We're going to do a simulated engine out to, emergency descent to a simulated engine out, right? We have a set plan the entire time, right? Whereas with another student or the same student, whatever it is, we're going to go up another day. We're just going to get in the plane. We're going to practice whatever we feel like doing. It's just random, right? We're going to go up. Let's just hop in the plane and see where the plane takes us. And let's hit any maneuver we want, really, right? That's going to be the random type of practice. Then we have the blocked practice. This is going to be more or less if a student is kind of struggling with a maneuver where you'll be using blocked. But it's good because the student can kind of practice it over and over again. But it's also bad, the blocked practice, because maybe they've done it, let's say 5 or 6 times in an hour or whatever, and they're kind of getting burnt out. But they do that, everything's just instantly because they know it's going to come, right? But the more effective and the most effective type of practice is going to be the random. There's no set plan. The student does not know what's coming. And if I tell my student, all right, let's do 8s on pylons, right? And they're going to be like, okay, so it's been, some days or maybe a week of not flying, and they're going to come back, and they're not knowing what to expect. So they're going to go up, they're going to do it. And if they do it well, then that's how I know they've mastered that subject. But if they do really poorly, then I know we're going to maybe need a little bit more blocked, right? So it's good kind of for getting information on how well a student can do. And then we have evaluation versus critique. Now, evaluation is going to be more or less used during the onset of training, and then the critique is going to be used more toward the end of training, if that makes sense. Evaluation is kind of saying you've done good, or this was bad, or this was good, this was bad, right? Versus critique, where hey, this was bad. You maybe could have pulled out, let's say, 50 RPM when you were doing lazy eights. You could have pulled out maybe 50 or 60, 70 RPM, and maybe you wouldn't gone over your airspeed, right? That's that little bit more of a critique, because the student's going to be very fixated on doing the right thing, but they're also, if they're 5 hours or 10 hours, 15 hours of flight time, you don't really want to give them a critique because you're going to get overwhelmed really fast. So if you say evaluation, hey, we've done a really good flight today, let's just keep it up, right? Versus critique, they're at, let's say 35, 40 hours of flight time. They're getting ready for that check ride. When they need to kind of tone up a little bit, maybe on their maneuvers or whatever it is, then that's when I need to kind of step in and be like, okay, you could have done this a little bit better by doing this, right? Doing this. We have distractions, interruptions, fixation, and inattention. So distraction, the student is going to be distracted no matter at what point of training they're at, right? I get distracted, right? It happens to everyone. Even airline captains, they get distracted, I'm sure, right? It's just a part. But it's always about mitigating your distractions and your interruptions and fixation, right? So we have distractions. Distractions, especially at the student level, the student pilot will always have distractions. They're going to be more able to be distracted than, let's say, a 500-hour CFI or a 1,000-hour CFI or a 1,500-hour CFI. They're going to not really know how to mitigate that distraction. So it's your job as an instructor to teach them how to mitigate that, right? Same thing with interruptions and fixation, right? We're all familiar with the, you're in the plane or whatever on final and your instructor drops a pen or pencil, right? And they're going to be like, okay, can you grab that for me? And you're 200 feet above the ground on your final, and your student wants to go pick up a pen. Like, are you kidding me? Right? So it's teaching them how to avoid that, right? How to focus on what's important and then take care of it. Right? Then we have fixation and inattention, more or less the same thing. Now, we have two types of things. We have errors. Slip, let me bring this up here. We have a slip and a mistake, right? The slip, an error of action. You plan to do one thing, but inadvertently do something else, right? It's a neglecting to do something, right? It's just a slip. You plan to do one thing, but you actually accidentally do something else, right? I slipped. Now, mistake is an error of thought. When you plan to do the wrong thing and you succeed. You plan to do the wrong thing and you succeed. Keyword. Versus a slip, an error of action. Just remember that. So mistake, I'm coming in, and my instructor says, all right, flaps up, where we're doing a touch and go, let's say, and we're coming on final or whatever, and we land and say, all right, flaps up, let's go. And then I hit the gear and I gear up the airplane on the runway, right? That's going to be a mistake. Where a slip, or more or less, would be, you're coming in, let's say to land, right? And you say, blah, 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 tower, we're November 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We are 10 miles to the west, when actually you realize you're actually from the east, right? Because you slipped. You see on the on your DG that you're coming in from the opposite way. So it's just a little bit of confusion and you slip, right? Then we have the memory system, the sensory register, short-term memory, long-term memory. Short-term memory is going to be more or less, 30 seconds, a minute, 5 minutes, kind of anything less than 5 minutes is going to be stored in the short-term memory, like phone digits or a clearance, right? Clearance, stuff like that. But long-term memory, right? It goes through the sensory register, and the sensory register almost deems it whether it's going in the short term or the long term. If it deems it in the short term and it knows it's important for the long term, it's going to be stored in the long-term memory. Essentially is what it is. And anything long-term memory is anything longer than 5 to 10 minutes of time, and it's going to be long-term information that you need. For instance, studying for a check ride, everything's built upon it, right? So you're going to need that for your long-term memory. And then we have how usage affects memory. We could say how usage affects memory. Now, again, this is where the ACS kind of gets a little bit bland, where it's kind of hard to come up with something. But when you're using something a lot, right, it's going to be, kind of, it's practice makes perfect, essentially, right? And things best learned recently are going to be better, information in your head, right? So how usage affects memory, the more you use it, the better you're going to memorize it, right? That's basically the definition of it. Then we have forgetting. Now we have forgetting. We have up on the right here. We have fading, interference, repression, suppression, and retrieval failure. Fading, it's fading exactly the sound. It's not going to be used, so it fades away. You're not using your information for IFR training. You haven't filed IFR in a year, and you haven't done it right. Your information is going to be fading. For an interference, similar things. Certain experiences causes forgetting. Interference, the difference between learning something versus something else that can interfere with it, right? The prop system on the Piper Seminole versus the Piper Arrow. This is more or less the same thing, because the interference, those two oil system or the governor systems are reversed, right? So that could be an interference. We have repression, and suppression. So repression, exactly as it sounds. It's going to be pushed away due to maybe some bad experience that the student had. They're going to be repressing that memory. They don't want to remember it due to the bad feeling that happened or something like that. We have the retrieval failure, which is very common and everyone knows it. It's that tip of the tongue sensation, like, oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. I know it. You know it. It's right there, but it's a failure to actually grab that information, which is going to be a retrieval failure for forgetting. More or less, it is like it's there. You may feel like it's there, but ultimately you did forget. And even though how many times your student will say, "Oh, but I know it. Like it's fine. It's okay." Well, you still failed to get it. If you did know it, you would have told me, right? But it's going to more or less have to do with a little bit of that fading and the interference and confusion between two things. Then we have the retention of learning and the transfer of learning, right? The retention of learning. We use the acronym PRAMS. PRAMS. That's what we do. Retention of learning. PRAMS. Praise, repetition, association, attitude, mnemonics, and senses. PRAMS. Praise stimulates learning. Simple. If I tell my student, hey, we did a great flight today, they're gonna go back and tell their family or whatever it is, or their friend, like, yeah, I did such a good job today, like he's really proud of me, right? That is going to be affecting the student. They're going to be more wanting to learn. They're going to feel better about themselves and more confident. Repetition aids with recall. No, aids with recall. More essentially, just repetition, right? Practice makes perfect. That's all it is. And then we have association. We talked about this a little bit earlier. With something to be learned helps with recall, right? So learning how to associate this feeling with what's happening, or this, one of my five senses with what's happening, I'm able to associate that. Then we have the attitude. People learn and remember only what they wish to know, right? Attitude. It's all about their attitude. A student who, let's say wants to get into flying, and you ask them their goal, and they say, oh, well, I just want to be a crop duster the rest of my 40 years of career, or whatever it is, right? They're maybe not going to want to divulge into the whole ATP side and maybe filing IFR or something like that. So people only are going to want to learn what they wish to know. If they only want to be a crop duster, then they're going to be a crop duster. But if you ask your student their goal, and they're going to say, oh, I want to be an airline captain on the A350 for working for whoever, or 777 pilot, right? Then they're going to be wanting to learn a lot more than that, bush pilot, or maybe that whatever I was talking about earlier, the crop duster, right? It's all about their attitude. Then we have the usage of mnemonics, right? We're using it right now because PRAMS, FUR, Reaper, right? PIMA, those are going to be mnemonics to remember. Pattern of letters. We have senses. Using multiple senses is most effective, right? Just talking about with the perceptions of insights. And your DPE will love this when you do this on your check, right? Say, oh yeah, the retentional learning, that's going to help with our senses and whatever, and we stimulate more senses by doing that. Well, we're able to associate the senses with doing something, and we're able to perceive and insight. You're you bring that the whole FOI topic, you know, from task A to B or B to F, or, you know, something like that, C to D, right? You compare those two, your DP will be very forgiving if you may not know something. So it's always good to compare and contrast different FOI subjects, which is very important for that. Then transfer of learning, which is the last one. We have two ones, positive and negative. Simple. Positive would be, let's say, if I am a mechanic, or let's say I'm a car guy, right? I'm familiar with you know, engines, on how engines work, right? And I want to get my private pilot's license, and my instructor's teaching me about engines. Well, oh, that's a positive transfer of learning, because I'm similar. I'm familiar with the, you know, the engine cycles, the suck, squeeze, bang, blow, right? The engine cycle, and it's going to be a positive transfer of learning. Negative transfer. And we're all familiar with steering a car versus the plane, right? So if we're steering the yoke and I want to go to the left like a car, it's going to be different from the plane. I'm not going to go left. I'm not going to go left in the plane until I mash on that rudder, right? That's going to be a negative transfer of learning, and trust me, I did it, you know, for the sub 5 or 6 hours of flight time. Every single time I wanted a taxi, I was doing this. Until my instructor said, you know, hey, put your hands, you know, underneath your legs, right? And then just use your legs to steer. And we'll just taxi around the ramp for whatever, right? So we did that, right? That's going to be a negative transfer of learning, because you need to really develop that new habit. So that is going to be that. So that is going to be everything regarding task B. We've talked about inadequate or incomplete instruction, lack of learner motivation, recognizing and correcting learner errors. So, cool. We've talked about task B today. Look forward to task C, D, E, F in this whole series. If it's in the future, and I hope you pass your check ride, whatever it is, there's going to be more videos in this series. I hope you check it all out. I'm hoping I'm doing a really good job. Let me know if you guys need anything else in the comments. I'd be happy to help you with anything regarding a question or whatever it is. So until then, I'm the Jack Pilot. I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya. Maintain VFR, frequency change approved. See ya.